Welcome to our first official panel today, 40 years of Star Wars, stories of the original trilogy. And with me on stage are 4 actors from the original movie. So can we get an applause for that?
Still alive.
Still going strong.
Still alive.
I've prepared an introduction, but it would be even more awesome if you could introduce yourself. Let's start with you.
Hello, my name is Tim Rose. I played Admiral Akbar, Salacious Crumb, and Sice Noodles before she got replaced by CG in Return of the Jedi.
Excellent.
I'm Mike Carter, and I played Bib Fortuna in Return of the Jedi.
Hi, I'm Richard Oldfield. I played Hobby, one of the pilots in Empire Strikes Back.
Jeremy Bullock played Boba Fett. That'll scare the lot of you.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry, I was misbehaving.
Thanks. Well, welcome again. It's great to have you here. It's been 40 years since the original trilogy. 40 years. Yeah. How do you look back on that period? Can I start with you?
Funny enough, I look back at that period all the time. There were no computers, at least not for individuals,
Right.
and there was no internet.
Yeah.
And I must say, it was a much nicer time. You could joke around more, and you could say what you wanted to say. And 40 years later, you have to be careful what you say.
Right.
Just sitting at the bar in the hotel, you can get in trouble now for absolutely anything, which I find a bit nerve-wracking. I thought we had a much freer, funner time back then.
Actually, it's good that you remind me of something, because it's a Q&A. Everyone is able to ask questions. We have microphones over there and over there. Feel free to come down. Some of us haven't seen The Last Jedi yet, so please don't ask any questions that will elicit spoilers for the movie. So keep that in mind. And Michael, how do you look back on this period?
With great difficulty. It seems a long time ago. It was fun. I'd never thought about it like that. Just what Tim said is absolutely true. It was free and easy. People, I kind of had to be persuaded to do the job, and I had no idea what it was I was letting myself in for. And I was young, and I didn't, things are going well. I was busy. I wasn't all that bothered. But I remember going up to Elstree for 3 months before the film started, just to do pre-production, and it was I just enjoyed myself. I remember once driving there in the snow and my car sliding back down the hill. It was really quite dangerous, and a whole bunch of people behind me sliding back down the hill behind me, so I didn't hit them. Absolutely, at the same time. Timed beautifully. So yeah, it did seem much more carefree than it is today, but I think that's just the times.
Right.
Those days were a lot freer and easier, particularly in filming. If you're lucky to be a North American actor in the UK and in the Union, there were lots of opportunities in US productions, and there wasn't the sort of manic security on the set that you get these days.
Right.
It was much, much more relaxed. Particularly on the early Star Wars films, there was a sense of community on the sets, and I actually really look back on that time with great fondness.
Is that a big difference between the old movies and the new movies?
Oh God, yeah. Now you can't. You have to sign every bit of script and disclosure. I mean, God knows it's very, very. I mean, my kids visited the set. You can't do that these days.
All right.
It's
that tight. Your kids can't come on the set.
Huh?
It's that tight, the security. Your kids can't even visit.
No, these days you can't.
Right.
Back then you could.
It's so tight, we can't even go on to the next set if we're not actually filming that particular piece of footage.
No, you have to. No, you can't wander around. I mean, at the few weeks I was at Elstree, I would watch other scenes and just nobody bothered about any of that.
Right.
And so that made it, quite good fun.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see.
Well, the whole thing was fun. It was like being a little child and saying, "Oh, I can't believe this. Oh, look at this. What does this do?" And it was just such fun. People would know, I'll get you a cup of tea, I know you're having makeup, don't worry,
Right.
I'll get it. And then you forget.
Oh, amazing.
But the whole thing was exciting, and now it's back again.
Yeah.
It's just going on and on.
And I guess less CGI as well. More props, bigger props on the set. It must have been cool to be around with.
I went to the crew screening,
Yeah.
and what struck me, of course, at crew screenings, that's the only time that everybody always sits there to the last name on the on the screen. But that's what struck me. If you came and looked at Return of the Jedi and watched the scroll of names at the end of it,
Right.
and now you watch the scroll of names, probably it took a quarter of the number of people to actually make our movie as it did to make this last one.
Right.
You know, It goes on forever.
In December 2016, we lost our beloved Carrie Fisher, who played Princess Leia Organa. Richard, you had a scene with her in The Empire Strikes Back
Yeah.
during the Battle of Hoth. How do you look back on that scene? working
Oh,
with her?
Carrie Fisher, bless her, was, I mean, she was obviously Looney Tunes, but in the nicest possible way. She was such a funny girl. I mean, she was a girl back then, remember. She was,
Right.
18, I think, at the time. And she was genuinely so the nicest, gracious lady you could find. I think anybody who's met her at conventions would attest to that. Everybody found her. She gave loads of her time to the fans, and she was just such a lovely,
Wow.
lovely lady to work with.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's a great loss. And Jeremy, besides playing Boba Fett, you also had a scene with her as an Imperial officer in Cloud City. The scenes on Cloud City.
Yes, it was one of those wonderful things where people said, Jeremy, quickly, get changed. We need an officer here. I don't know which. Just come on, we need you. I said, well, I'm not due. No, just get on with it. And it was that attitude, but then a giggle and a fun. And it was really, and talking about Carrie Fisher, it was so wonderful to be with and giggling and laughing. What's happening? Oh, this is so. She loved it as well. And then towards what happened with her, which was awful, she said, would you mind looking after Gary? And I said, that was her dog that would come in and flop on the floor.
Right.
It was fun, just
Right.
all great fun.
Oh,
Naughty.
Yeah, she and Mark Hamill were the naughtiest of the
Oh wow.
lot on the.
Do you have can you
go
elaborate
into-
on that?
Well, no, it was when was it? 1980, and it was nice. I know, isn't it ridiculous? And everybody, I mean, Empire Strikes Back was the film that the studios didn't want to make, and George Lucas had to find separate financing to do it. Subsequently, it felt a little bit more like an independent production rather than a big studio production.
Right.
The only real star there was, I guess, Harrison Ford, because Carrie was not a big
No.
star. Mark had only done a little bit of work, and there was a lot of fooling around and
Right.
good fun during that time.
Wow, amazing. Do we have any questions from the audience already? Yeah, feel free to go to the mic. Can you briefly state your name and then ask your question? Oh, be careful.
The lawsuit.
Yes, it does work. I have a question. My name is Peter. I'm here for Tim Rose. I have a question about the new series from Star Wars in 2019. Would you like to play in the series from the new Disney streaming service?
The what service?
The new series.
Right.
I'm
your
a
time,
little
it's
bit
okay.
nervous.
I'm too, so don't worry.
Okay, yeah. So Lucas film made an announcement to bring a Star Wars series in 2019. Would you like to play in the series?
Oh, yes, please. They spent all that time making that costume. It seems a shame not to use it.
Okay.
Would any of you?
They haven't discussed the matter with me personally, but
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the call.
we're waiting
I've just
for-
been cast.
That's cool.
Wow. Are there any more questions? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's
Oh, do I have a? This is all planned, special effect.
Feeding back to the
What a gift.
Yeah, what a gift. Yeah, you're right. Tim, Michael, you spent a lot of time on the set of Return of the Jedi in the early 80s. By then, I could say, I think you can say it was an established franchise with a great decor, a lot of money, many impressive props. What was it like to work on a set like that in that era?
Well, I was just the right age that when the original Star Wars movie came out, I was a teenager. So
Perfect.
my friends and I went to the cinema, feet up on the back, pretending we're flying X-Wings. And then, of course, I'm now walking past the Millennium Falcon to go get into my own spaceship.
Yeah.
Because I was only 24, something like that at the
Mhm.
time. And, of course, pre-computer graphics, everything you see in the movie, you are actually walking past.
Right,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
It's all right there. So all the toys to play with
Wow, yeah.
are right there.
Yeah, that's quite a difference as well, right? The CGI versus the props, and there's an exhibition at the moment showing all the.
I did an interview with one of the CGI guys yesterday,
Right.
and we were discussing that I think that's why the new movies stand out as well as they do, is
Mhm.
because so much of what you're seeing they did actually build.
Right.
You know, a lot of the movies now, it's just the actors have to work to green, and the biggest problem is to not see green on their faces while they're performing. But
Right.
most of what you see, certainly at ground level,
Right.
we actually get to play with. It is actually there. So
Yeah. So the props are there, and they put like a layer of CGI on top of that. In addition to that.
yeah, they add
Yeah.
in, but
Yeah,
it's
okay.
all there to start with.
Oh well, that must help if you're actually if you're performing.
It makes it so much easier to suspend your disbelief and get on with it. Yeah.
Right. And Michael, how was this for you?
Well, I think Jeremy summed it up, said it was a bit like being a big kid in a way. You know, you turned up in a funny costume and spoke a funny language, and you got a check at the end of the week. It was great. But there were people wandering around the set. I mean, Jabba's hut, Jabba's palace. I mean, Jabba's hut, Jabba the Hutt, Jabba Palace and his hut.
He probably had a hot too.
You did somewhere either back. We always go around there and play cards and have coffee. You know, it was, you walk on that set, you just think, this is nuts.
Yeah.
This is completely bonkers. But it's great fun, and it's very professional. And there was always people scurrying around the set, checking it, making sure everything was okay, making sure all the little blinking lights
Right.
were working. So everything you saw was really actually there. It was very hot, but you did the job seriously. I mean, you did the job seriously, but it was just like being a big kid. It was
Yeah.
great fun, great fun. It was kind of magical in a way, quite magical. I think these big films in those days were. There were a few of the old timers from the old days as well still on the crew, and it was always interesting to talk to them, you know, people who'd worked in the old black and white days and stuff like that.
Right. They bring their expertise and sort of.
Yeah, they did. And they brought a tradition and they brought an attitude, and they
Right.
brought as you say, a real strong tradition of film, particularly in Britain and America, the Americans over there, which it's kind of disappeared in a funny sort of way today, because people move from TV to streaming stuff to big movies. It doesn't feel as if there's a continuum of a strong tradition today, which it did in those days.
Yeah.
Can I tell a story?
Yeah, of course, please.
One of the old guys, like I said, because we were working with guys that had been working for a long time. And at our studio, one of the old special effects guys had worked on Mutiny on the Bounty.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking about the storm scene, and they had these dump tanks that took an hour and a half just to fill, and then they would dump them and blow all the actors off the ship and everything, and then refill them. But in those days, what they did was they just opened the stage doors, and when they went home that night, Bournemouth High Street was 10 inches deep in water. Now these days, with health and safety, you wouldn't even be able to do the movie.
Right.
So.
Would you think there's a big difference between Richard? You mentioned the Empire Strikes Back was felt more like an independent film, and
Well, I think it was more like an independent film because of the financing. But carrying on from the difference of then to today, what always struck me, which I didn't know, it was my first job in a sci-fi movie, I think, and then. Was in the fight scenes in the Battle of Hoth in the X-wing fighters.
right,
You're sitting there on a milk crate in this in this mock-up of this plane, and there's two stage hands either side with broom handles,
right,
rocking the thing. I mean, that's the technology that was back
Right.
was back then. But I think the success of the newer films, getting rid of having more animatronics
Right.
and more real physical props, it immeasurably helps the actor connect with
yeah,
in the scene instead of playing the scene to a tennis ball on a stick.
yeah,
You lose something if you
Yeah.
don't have the actual person there
yeah. It makes the job harder.
making the connection with.
Right. Yeah. I see. Yeah. Any more questions from the audience already? Yes, please come down. Hello. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Marjolein, and I have a question for Tim Rose. And obviously, it must be fantastic to be part of something huge like Star Wars. But for you, a few years ago, I think the scene "It's a Trap" became a meme on the internet, and I was wondering. How does that feel to become a meme all of a sudden, and for your character to get blown up again?
Well, personally, I'm just happy that they like that line the most, because everybody wants it on their photographs. And if I had to write, "We cannot withstand the firepower of that magnitude," or that would take all day, and I wouldn't be able to sign all the pictures. And so, no, obviously, for that to go onto the internet, it's been very, very helpful for me and my character. So,
And do you ever get sick of having to say the line?
no, not at all.
Could I ask you to do it?
All right.
It's a trap. Did I get? Yeah. Did I get the part? Was it?
Done well. We have a question over there.
Yeah, my name is Mark. I was 10 years old when the first movie was screened. So first of all, I'm very honored to be in a room with the four of you. You were talking about the old days and the freedom you had in that time. I was just wondering, and it's a question to all four of you, did you have any leeway to contribute to the storyline, and did you also get a chance to fool around with what happened in the story, or bend the scenes a little bit to your own hand or ideas?
Great.
No.
No.
No,
Short
in the part. I mean, I've had loads of work over my career, but I'm only known for two fighters against a Star Destroyer, and that line in that scene. But there's not a lot of room to. Particularly in those days where budgets are tight, there's not the time to improvise, and also you don't really know the whole. You didn't get the whole script. You don't know what.
You got a part of the script.
You get just a part of the script, and it's very difficult to try to add something that might influence something that you don't know about.
Right. So it's rather rigid then, in a way.
In a way, yeah.
Let's do the scenes. Oh yeah. And does that answer your question?
Actually-
It answers it. It's a little bit disappointing, but I knew what George Lucas was all about. So
I got to influence it quite a bit because I'd worked with Jim Henson. Jim Henson had been developing what we now know of as animatronics and everything, but even for ILM, that was quite new. So when I went to work in Phil Tippett's workshop, they were building alien characters, but I got them, I convinced them to make the close-up Akbar as a hand puppet. So the one that you see that does most of the dialogue, I was inside the body operating the head. And in California, that was just not the way these things were done at the time. So I was really happy because I'd just been fired off of Greystoke, Lord of the Apes, trying to convince him to do the exact same thing. So Phil let me have a go at it and prove that it could work. So that was very, very exciting for me as a young man. So
That's fantastic.
Good for you and good for us. Thank you.
Jeremy, would you also like to elaborate on that question? Did you have a lot of freedom to
Have a lot of freedom, but I remember taking half a day. They said, Jeremy, go with the guys, they just want to talk to you. I said, what's the matter? He said, we're going to do a quarter of the day or half the day.
Mm-hmm.
They want to see you use your ship. You've got to get used to it. So it's click, 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 bang. And it never happened. You did it, and here I go. And being cool, there, nothing happened at all. So I ended up getting the cups of tea. I say, I can get a cup of tea. Yes, if you can, Jeremy, then we'll go through the... Never happened.
Yeah.
So you sort of made it up a bit. But I had the nicest time in the world.
Yeah.
All these skilled gentlemen here.
Right.
But I had a ball. I did make tea once or twice.
Excellent. Michael?
There was one thing that Bib did, which was off script, which was devised by David Tomblin and myself. There was a party scene, and Bib gets a bit drunk, and he's with a very voluptuous, beautiful young lady, and there's a little bit of a joke with Salacious Crumb here, who pinches his beer, and we filmed it, and it was all very funny, and everybody thought that was terrific. And I was going to go in the film, but George cut it. Not because we'd been impertinent enough to do our own thing, but simply because the young woman I was with was very, very voluptuous, as I said, and she had a very skimpy glass bra on, and George said, it is, after all, a children's film. So we were cut.
Not anymore.
Seems appropriate.
but it was funny.
This was fun nonetheless. I can't really see, but there's someone. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Marijn van Ypres. I'm from Gouda. First, I would like to thank you all for coming to Utrecht, the Netherlands. Thank you very much. And Echo Base for organizing this. It's a great event. I grew up in I was born in 1973, so I was 10 years old when Return of the Jedi came out. And I breathed Star Wars. It was everything for me. And I had all your characters except Hobie. Sorry, in little figures.
Right.
So Boba Fett and Bib Fortuna, those were two of my favorite characters. And I read in an interview, Mr. Bullock, that you modeled Boba Fett on Clint Eastwood, his character, or is I have read that. I don't know if that is true, but I can imagine. And I have a specific question to Mr. Carter. What real-life character did you have in mind, or did you have someone in mind when you played Bib Fortuna?
No, I had no one in mind when I played Bib Fortuna. None at all. There's nobody you can actually relate Bib Fortuna to. Poor souls. All I did was, I didn't know what Bib was going to look like until they took me in for a lighting test, and they spent 8.5 hours putting all this makeup on me. But they turned me away from the mirror, so I couldn't see what I looked like. And it was only the very end, when everything was on, the costume, the makeup and everything, that they let me look at myself in the mirror. And I saw what Bib looked like for the first time. This is the Friday before we started filming. I was in first thing on the Monday morning. And I remember at drama school, we used to do these mask exercises where there would be a ritual attached to putting a mask on. And you would just kind of stare at the mask and until it would sort of suggest something to you. And then you would put it on, or sometimes you put the mask on and you would just look at the reflection, and you would kind of get an idea of the character. That's all I did. I just used to look in the mirror, and I would see this creature staring back at me, and it sort of, in a funny kind of way, dictated how I would move. He seemed very feminine, which is why you got all these sort of rather delicate hand movements.
I
So
borrow-
he wasn't modelled on anyone at all. No, not as far as I was concerned. And I hope to goodness that the makeup people didn't model him on anyone who's alive.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice day today.
Thank you.
So you basically improvised when you had
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you had the
It's all
mask
you don't do the method.
on. Yeah. No, you don't. Right.
Yeah, they do. I mean, you've got to do it. You've got to do it for real. It's got to be real.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just false. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We have another question there.
Yes. Hi, I'm Merlin Wurst from Gouda also. I actually had a question about costumes or like puppets in this case. What was the best and worst part about wearing the costume or just having a puppet or anything? What was just the best and the worst parts about those things?
Is it directed at anyone specific?
Just everyone, I guess.
Everyone.
Everyone.
Jeremy, would you like to start?
I think we'll start with the worst. I think the worst thing was, it was great being Boba Fett, but it was the most uncomfortable costume I've ever had. You'd start to walk and go, but you can't be seen to be going, oh, that hurt.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You'll be off the set straight away.
Yeah.
But that was just the most uncomfortable,
Yeah.
awful.
It wasn't uncomfortable. It was painful.
Oh, it was taped here, underneath the crutch here. It was, yes, and down by your knees. And at the end of the day, you'd come in and go, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. They can get anybody they want.
Right.
But in the end, you succumb, and there. Morning!
Yeah.
And I remember Mike saying, do you want a cup of tea, Mike? I'm going to get some.
Yeah.
And if you remember, Mike, do you remember the tea? That was fun. But there was a lot of camaraderie with all the guys getting ready. Oh, yes. And are we going to see Jabba the Hutt?
Yeah.
Didn't see you there.
Right.
Were you on the set?
Uh,
Silent.
Jabba the Hutt.
Yes?
Yeah, you were. I remember that as well. I feel better now.
I was lucky it was just a orange flight suit.
It was a
It was
cool
fine.
costume.
Yeah,
That must have been.
poly cotton.
Yeah. True X-wing pilot.
It was a nightmare.
Oh yeah.
I had 13 pieces glued on my face. Today they probably just use a mask. But and I was going to say cellular dermatitis. It wasn't cellular dermatitis. I had contact dermatitis and abrasions of the cornea. Yeah, but I mean, it was just awful. It was just terrible. And this bloody stuff glued on you. But one of the things I learned was that I had to shampoo my hair once every 3 days. If I shampooed it every second day, my head itched. Or every fourth day, my head itched. So I had to do it every 3 days. And my head would be itchy under that polyurethane skull. And this was the worst thing. And there was no way you could get at it. You couldn't stick a needle in and scrunch my hand. And so I'd be standing there for days just gritting my teeth and, oh, God, I can't get through that time. And a line would come up, and I'd drape, and or whatever it was. And then one day, it was so bad. It got worse and worse and worse. I stood it for 6 hours, and this itchy head got worse and worse and worse, till I reached a point where I would have given my children away just to be able to scratch my head. And I went up to David Tomlin and I said, David, my head itches. And he said, all right, everybody stop, take Mr. Carter off set, get his head off. And I was taken back to the dressing room, and Nick Dudman, my makeup guy, sat me in the chair, and I was almost crying by this stage. And he brought out, I swear to God this is true, he brought out a heavy bladed knife, which looked like a big Bowie knife. I said, what are you going to do with that? He said, I'm just going to split the skull. And he hit me in the head with this knife, split the skull. Didn't split my skull, thank goodness. Ripped the skull open, and I put my hand inside the skull and scratched my head for about 5 minutes. And I think it was the most pleasant 5 minutes of my life. And that was it. And they let me off early that day. I got home early. I actually got home in time to pick up the kids from school. So it was a very bad day, but it was a very good day as well, you know.
I was at a convention in Australia, and the fans asked me, oh, is Akbar going to be in The Force Awakens? I just laughed and said, if he is, it's going to be somebody in there who is the age I was when I played Akbar. They're not going to ask an old man to do it. But then they did ask an old man to do it. And my biggest fear was being killed by my character. It's extremely claustrophobic. You can't get yourself out. If you get into trouble, it's up to other people to help you.
Right.
The moment that springs to mind for me, well, there were two. It was Rogue One, where I had the new character. The first time they put it on my head, they flicked the switch on and the mouth went shut, and the back of the mouth interior came across my nose and mouth and completely blocked my airways. And I was trying to tell them that I couldn't breathe, but nobody could hear me because I was completely blocked by the mouth of the costume. Isn't he funny? He's dancing around and doing all these funny things. But the one that really, with Admiral Rhodus, with Paul who's here, and Aiden, who is the other calamari in that scene. Aiden and I, we're both the same age, but he's in much better shape than I am. And we got in this competition of who could do the best dying scene. So he's throwing himself across stage, and I'm not going to let him do that, so I'm throwing myself over Rhodus's chair and all this. Anyway, it got so physical that I couldn't get enough air in there. So I went over to the AD. We were on a race set, so all our dressers and things had been put downstairs. And I went over to the AD to try and explain that I was dying, and he's telling me, sit down, we're not finished filming yet. It's like, no, you don't understand. I'm dying. I can't breathe. Very interesting when you're in there, yes.
Wow. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Do you have another?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Jeremy, despite minimal screen time, Boba Fett became a hugely popular character. How do you explain that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, talent, I suppose.
Of course, talent.
No, I think he's a Western character like Shane.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about him that he's ready to suddenly shoot the gun. And
Right.
people, it was just luck that I carried on playing it. My brother was involved with
Mm-hmm.
casting in some way. And he said, well, come and meet George, which I did. And he said, see you tomorrow. And it was that quick. But
It was this quick how you got into the Star Wars film.
yeah, it was, it just happened.
Wow.
And I was lucky. And it wasn't so bad for me, with the thing. The good guys over there just had to go through an awful lot for the...
Yeah.
I could look cool. And I think they're probably wasting time now. They've got to take the helmet off somewhere.
Right.
You must be able to see him somewhere.
Yeah. It must be a matter of minutes for the two of you and hours for the two of you to get on the costumes.
No, I'm afraid it's Mike.
Mike, you win this
It's
contest?
the prosthetics. I just had a head that pulled on and off as well. Were you allowed to eat?
Well, it was very difficult eating because I had false teeth.
Oh.
Also, I had false fingers, so if I tried to pick something up, it would fall over.
Right.
So I had to be fed, and I had to have tea supplied to me through a straw.
Right.
So it was difficult. No, well, yeah, I couldn't eat. I lost weight over the 5-week period, simply because I couldn't eat.
Yeah.
So it's just breakfast and then afterwards. Oh, wow. 5 minutes, right? Any more questions from the audience? Yep, please.
Hi, I'm Raymond. I'm from The Hague, and I have a question to all of you. I was wondering, after the Star Wars movie, did you continue acting, or did you start doing your old job? And what was that before you start acting?
Right.
Do something real. No, I think all of us who were on that were it was just a normal job. It was you went for an audition and you showed up at the studio, and you did your thing for a couple of weeks, and then you went on and waited for the next job. I think I was lucky. I was in a play at the time, so
I see.
I was still working. But yeah, it was carried on. Luckily for another 37 years acting. So
Right.
yeah.
I carried on. Funny enough, like you, I did a play up in the West End in 6 months,
Hmm.
and then the film had started. They were going to show it, and I don't know what happened after that, but I was seeing this play, and would you do it? Yes. And I was up for it for 6 months. Came off that, and then, have you seen the film? And I said, no, I haven't yet. And suddenly, we was doing a showing similar to this.
Right.
And so I was managing to do the play as well as doing the film.
Oh wow.
But then that changed, and off you went, and it was just a great time.
Right. Right.
Three
How was this for you, Mike?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realise to us it was just a job. We're professional actors. You went from job to job to job. And I remember actually when I was offered it, I was actually offered it during the interview by Richard Marquand, and I really had to be persuaded. I thought, I don't know if I want to do this. It was about 3 months ahead. I was shooting a TV series at the time. Yeah, I went on and just carried on acting. I mean, I can't even remember what I did after that, but I was quite busy then because I was young. So it was really just one of many, many, many jobs. It's just that I don't think any of us realised that it was going to have the kind of impact
Right.
that it's had, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah, that must be amazing.
Doing the Star Wars and Akbar is okay, but that was all just rehearsal for my most important role, because I got to do the animatronic work in Mr. Kikker. It's a Dutch movie that came out.
Mr. Kikker?
Mr. Kikker. I don't know how to say it. I haven't actually gotten to see it, but I got to do animatronics for that.
Yeah, Star Wars was just rehearsal.
The funniest thing was, I went in because we need to work. We still need to earn money and things. People always think we have money just because we worked in Star Wars. I don't know why. So I go into audition to get the part to operate the frog in Mr. Kikker.
Right.
And in the man's office, behind his desk, there's a big poster, and it's got Return to Oz on the wall. And this is the boss of the company. I said, oh, that's a really lovely poster. Why have you got that there? And he said, that was the movie I saw as a child that made me want to get into the movie business. And I went, oh, well, I designed how the Wheelers operated, and I made TikTok and operated him on set, and I did Jack Pumpkinhead as well. So can I get a job on Mr. Kikker?
And that got you the job.
And that got me the job, because I got him into the business. That's a very strange thing when you get older, when people start telling you that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think this was our last question. There's nothing from the audience anymore. All right. Thank you all for coming. It's really an honor to have you here. Thank you for elaborating on your experiences. It's really it's an honor for me as well. I really think it's very cool. Can we get a big applause for all the actors?